The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
You can't even tell there was ever a horse in that stall. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Who the hell would have taken the time with all this going on to have ordered the stall to be cleaned, straw taken down to the concrete? Who would have taken the time to do that, considering the horse was in surgery? But McVeigh never told anyone about his doubts. He didn't want to step out of bounds and lose his job. Terry McVeigh, Golden Eagle Insurance Adjuster, from Broken, The Suspicious Death of Alydar, and the End of Horse Racing's Golden Age, by Fred M. Cray. Well, welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. Happy 4th of July, America. I love this time of year. I love the fireworks, and I really support our Constitution. Well, this is episode 92, Salvation, Unbroken, The Suspicious Death of Alydar, and the End of Horse Racing's Golden Age by Fred M. Cray, Part 1. Now, I met Fred back at CrimeCon 2023 in Orlando, and we got into a very emotional discussion on his book. It is very different from the true crime books I've brought to you because the victim is equine, that is, a horse, a famous, beloved, amazing thoroughbred racehorse. My parents owned a racehorse when I was a teen, and I remember going to the track to visit him with the sheer joy of it. Thinking back, I can smell the hay and hints of manure and hear the trumpeter's call to post as anticipation heightened. Our boy was a beautiful bay with a white star on his forehead, grandson of native dancer who won the Preakness, Belmont, and Travers Stakes. Our horse, Jimmy Zaram, was not this successful, but both he and Alydar descend from native dancer. So I thought that was some kind of coincidence, right? All the horses out there, all the breeding going on. Now, to this story, all right, it broke my heart. If you are an animal lover, hunker down, because this is going to be very hard to hear. And this series on Broken is also an homage to my dad, who taught me how to handicap at the kitchen table when I was very small. Love you, Dad, and miss you. Now, also, if you didn't hear, recently, FeedSpot did their annual analysis of the top 80 book club podcasts. We rank number 15, up from 44 in 2023. And of these top 15, we are the only true crime book club. That we are the number one true crime book club podcast in 2024. This is our niche in the podcast universe, and I can't quite believe it. So thank you for your loyalty, your support, and those 5-star reviews. We could really use a few of those. Hint, hint, hint. All right, with the Triple Crown race as part of the spring season, the first race is the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs, followed by Baltimore, Maryland's Preakness, and then New York State's Belmont. This year, it was held at Saratoga Springs Racetrack due to construction. Fun fact, this is the second time in 99 years that the Belmont, the Run for the Carnations, has run at less than 1.5 miles, instead 1.25 miles. So congratulations to the 2024 winners, the Kentucky Derbies, Mystic Dan, the Preakness, Seize the Gray, and Dornosh, winner of the Belmont, who is also a great-great-great-grandson of Alydar. No Triple Crown in 2024. To honor these fine horses, I had to bring to book club a Gentleman's Whiskey Bacon Jam. This decadent condiment is perfect on grilled chicken, pork, burgers, French fries, grilled cheese, even my favorite, just cheese and crackers. So you cook the bacon in the pan until it's crisp. You set it aside on a paper towel. Save 4 tablespoons of bacon grease. You add chopped onion and shallots in the pan. Cook them till caramelized, adding in some garlic, brown sugar, maple syrup, apple cider vinegar, and the cooked bacon pieces. Remove from the heat, add whiskey or bourbon of your choice. Stir well and put the pan back on the heat to simmer. And when it's thickened, you are done. Now I am pairing this manna from heaven with Vina Robles Petit Syrah 2022. There is a difference between Syrah and Petit Syrah grapes. The former is derived from dark, inky purple grapes, where the Petit Syrah grapes are less intense, lighter, with a reddish purple hue. The Vina Robles Petit Syrah 2022 has high tannins, is fruity, and on the front you can savor blackberry, blueberry, and fig. Extremely rich, it bodies with an intense black pepper with even hints of coffee that just works deliciously with the whiskey bacon jam. I got this wine from www.wine.com for $23, and it is a terrific choice for our book club. And thank you, Amanda Riddle and the IamHomesteader.com for the delicious Gentleman's Whiskey Bacon Jam recipe. So bon appetit, murder bookies. Our author, Fred M. Cray, is an attorney from Florida who has spent over 40 years in civil law, from state to federal courts. He also practices animal law, which I didn't even realize was a thing, and I'm glad to know it is. He is the crusader who takes on the puppy mills, had input into dangerous dog classification, provides legal support for companion animals, and more, and I find myself cheering. A former adjunct professor of animal law at Barry University's Dwayne O. Andreas School of Law, Fred wrote Defending Against Dangerous Dog Classifications, an article published in American Jurisprudence, Proof of Facts. In 2016, Fred M. Cray won the prestigious American Bar Association's coveted Excellence in the Advancement of Animal Law Award. Clearly, he has a big heart for our furry family members. His book, Broken, was published in 2023 and comes in at 365 intense pages, choked with details and explanations, while being very intimate as a tale of success, greed, and destruction. So we begin in March 1978, while Alydar and Believe It were vying for the wire as the spectator stands vibrated with enthusiasm. This is when Fred Cray fell in love with Alydar, who breezed by Believe It by 4.5 lengths. Alydar, a magnificent stallion. Excelling at his law practice, it was years later, while on a horse farm tour in Ocala, Florida, that Fred learned his bus driver, whom he calls Miss Calumet, had been at Calumet Farm, in the heart of the Kentucky bluegrass racing industry. The night thoroughbred Alydar's leg was broken. Cryptic, Miss Calumet answered some of Fred's earnest questions, but then broke off their discussion saying, quote, "Everyone on that farm knows what happened to Alydar. That farm was protected. Security guards would run you out if you got near. Security was taken off. That never happens." End quote. Well, would she tell Fred what she knew? Hard no. Quote, "I'm not talking to you about this, and I'm afraid for my life and my children's lives." End quote. Well, what the hell did that mean? Like what? Well, this intrigued and deeply disturbed Fred. There had been crazy mafia rumors swirling around about J.T. Lundy, but was this real or fanciful? Curiosity burning, this ignited his search into everything Alydar. Studying the records, Fred noticed serious flaws in the insurance adjuster's procedures. Confirmation bias was obvious. That is, they were looking for evidence to prove the horse had an accident, and they found it. Now, Fred had misgivings about digging further. Quote, "It was naive to think that I could do better than the FBI after 3 decades had passed. I thought of Alydar in shock, streaming and shivering all alone in his stall with a broken cannon bone. Then his chiseled muscular body stilled in death, his chestnut coat slicked in sweat and matted with wood chips. It was unspeakable, and I had to try." End quote. This book is the result of that passion, that drive for the truth, and that love for the horse, Alydar, and is definitely a reading choice for anyone who loves true crime, demands justice, or just loves a mystery. It also provides a bit of an introduction to horse racing, so we understand our setting and the intense rivalry between Alydar and another thoroughbred, Affirmed, competitors who brought out the best in each other. I recall this rivalry vividly, being glued to the television with my dad cheering. Importantly, Fred asked the question, how did Alydar die, and why did Alydar die? And once again, I bring you the best true crime books, so you have to add this one to your reading list. So we look back at the 1920s and 30s, Bluegrass, Kentucky. Calumet Farm was all about harness racing, a very popular pastime back then. Through the 1940s and into the 60s, the emphasis shifted to thoroughbred racing, and Calumet dominated, producing 8 Kentucky Derby winners, 7 Preakness State winners, far outpacing any other horse farm to that date. Calumet's horses were inducted into the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame, and the farm was a fixture in American thoroughbred racing for decades, doing it with grace, style, and class. November 13th, 1990, a chilly night at Calumet Farm. Previously, Calumet had had several night watchmen charged with protecting the $50 million prize horses. Inexplicably, the watchman had been fired 6 months earlier. A single man, named Cowboy Kip, was solely responsible for securing the 762-acre farm, leaving 5 of their best, Alydar, Affirmed, Secreto, Mogambo, and Capote, alone for an hour each night as he made his rounds. Kip was off the night of November 13th, with Alydar's groom, Alton Stone, filling in. Records show that Stone checked out Alydar, Calumet's prime breeding stallion, at 9:30 p.m. with nothing amiss. Then Cray writes, quote, "Stone inexplicably senses something is wrong and returns to Alydar's stall at 10 p.m. He finds the horse facing forward in his stall, the small hook and eye latch on the stall door closed. The roller bracket that holds the door in while it slides open and closes is lying in the middle of the barn floor. The horse has a broken rear leg. His coat is steaming, the whites of his eyes expose terror." End quote. That is bad, horribly bad. How could this happen in 30 minutes? Maybe less. Cray describes the stall, so think of the scene of the crime, in detail. Padded, the floor is rubber, and there are no fresh kick marks on the stall door. Making an emergency call, veterinarians arrive, as do insurance adjusters, while Alydar is insured for $41.5 million. They quickly conclude that this is an accident, that Alydar has broken his right rear cannon bone, located between the horse's knee and ankle. So think the human shin bone, by kicking the stall door. The evidence is the sheared off roller bracket and a bit of blood on the straw by Alydar's injured foot. The straw is virtually undisturbed. As I said, there is $41.5 million of insurance on Alydar. And I think we learned to question big insurance payouts in our last book, Levi's Eyes by Aphrodite Jones, right? Well, so here we go. Paraphrasing now. The $41.5 million insurance investigation begins. Same Tuesday, November 13th, 1990. When a phone rings late at night, we all brace inwardly because we know it is probably not good news. Tom Dixon, an independent insurance adjuster for Lloyd's of London, felt that dread. On the phone was Kathy Lundy Jones, Calumet Farm insurance agent. "Get here quickly. Alydar has broken a leg." Shocked, by 10:30 Tom arrived at the red iron gates of Calumet with reporters and cameramen milling around outside. Calumet president, J.T. Lundy, did not share much information with them over the next 24 hours. This is a dire injury, though several thoroughbreds had survived broken legs. Personal ensign, she broke her pastern bone and continued her racing career once it healed. Swabs and Nureyev were two others. Tom prayed that Alydar would be one of the few. The stallion barn where the elite horses were housed is a large area with 3 stalls on either side, divided by a 12-foot or 3.6-meter wide corridor. Tom Dixon and a dozen tense people were milling around, including J.T. Lundy, Kathy Lundy Jones, who is his sister and insurance broker, and veterinarians Dr. William Baker and Linda Rhodes. A long night had begun. Tom Dixon noticed a small, square piece of metal in the middle of the red aisle. Well, what was that? J.T. Lundy told Tom, quote, "Oh, that's where he kicked the stall door," end quote. The metal bracket had been sheared off, and Dixon placed it next to Alydar's stall, taking 2 photographs. Dixon saw Alydar in shock, pain, shaking, unable to put any weight on the back leg. Beneath him was undisturbed hay and a small amount of blood. Only the broken roller bracket, which had been thrown 6 to 8 feet, or 1.8 to 2.4 meters, into the aisle, indicated anything had happened. Dixon would take many photos that night. Alydar standing in the bloodless straw, leg wrapped. Another was Alydar's stall and door, marred by previous kicks, and 2 photographs of Alydar's splinted leg. The stall door was 3 feet wide and weighed 300 pounds, which is 0.9 meters and 136 kilograms. Quote, "The bottom half was made with 2 sets of tongue and groove oak planking. The door was held in place in the middle by a U-shaped bracket holding a sliding wheel that was bolted to the cement floor," end quote. That being the roller bracket. When shut, the door was secured on all 4 corners with embedded doorstops. In all equine history, had any thoroughbreds or any other kind of horse kicked the stall door with enough force to shear off 2 metal screws embedded in concrete, breaking a cannon bone? No, never before. And why would Alydar, on a quiet night in a peaceful barn, suddenly violently kick his stall door with enough force to break his own leg? That was the $41.5 million question. Famous insurance company, Lloyd's of London, granted Tom Dixon the authority to conduct an investigation. He began questioning Lundy about how Alydar was injured. Filling in his report 3 days later, he wrote, quote, "According to Mr. Lundy, the horse had been seen that evening and was showing no problems. About 10 p.m., a loud noise was heard from the stall of Alydar. When checked, it was found he had kicked the bottom portion of the stall door with his right rear leg and in the process fractured the cannon bone," end quote. Lundy had said Alydar had a history of kicking and that Alton Stone had found Alydar injured. Dr. Larry Bramlage, a world-renowned surgeon from Rood and Riddle Equine Hospital, was called in. He speculated to the press that Alydar was feeling his oats and the leg bent sideways enough to break. Dixon would add, quote, "He just happened to kick that door too hard in the wrong way once too often," end quote. This established Alydar's injury as an accident. See, if it wasn't an accident, the insurance coverage would be void, not to mention sending a terrible chill through the public's perception of horse racing. That a horse was killed to collect insurance money? Just unthinkable. Pressure mounted to confirm Alydar's injury as accidental. Now, a few months later, after J.T. Lundy stepped down at Calumet, a new president and manager, John Ward, would say, quote, "Bramlage, the vet, is political enough that he knows not to get into a controversy," end quote. And horse trainer John Veach would add, quote, "There was a tremendous amount of pressure to stay out of the fight," end quote. There's a lot of foreshadowing here. Veterinarian Dr. Baker saw the broken cannon bone was beginning to pierce the skin, evolving into a compound fracture, which is 99% fatal due to infection and circulation difficulties. If this horse wasn't Alydar, he would already have been euthanized. Bramlage conceded that treatment was unlikely to save the horse, with Lundy insisting, quote, "This is the most productive horse in the industry. We've got to try," end quote. Bramlage sedated Alydar until morning, which helped to stabilize the horse. He was laid down, his head held by Sandy Hatfield, Calumet's manager of the broodmares, Dr. Rhodes, the resident veterinarian, Cowboy Kip, the normal watchman, who had come in on hearing what happened immediately, and groom Michael Coulter, who stayed all night. They made sure that Alydar didn't try to get up, and the rest would meet back at 7 a.m. Early the next morning, a wobbly Alydar was taken by ambulance to Calumet's veterinary clinic a few minutes away. Dixon took photos documenting the process. X-rays were taken, confirming the fracture. Bramlage would do the surgery to repair the leg, although Dr. Rhodes believed that it had a, quote, "near zero chance of success," end quote. Now, Lloyd's carried a $36.5 million policy on Alydar. Golden Eagle Insurance carried one for $5 million. With substantial loans to pay from First City Bank of Houston, they would receive any payout money first if Alydar did not survive. And the insurance companies would make all the medical decisions, including euthanasia. 2 hours later, the surgery was successful, although Alydar was still in the fight of his life as he hung from the sling. A few hours later, he seemed to be adjusting well. He was bright, alert, and was eating hay. Soon, he began to put a bit of weight on the injured leg. Dixon went to take photos of the outside of Alydar's stall door, and he left. He would return later that night. Golden Eagle Insurance's Brian Chambers, the West Coast supervisor of Horse Mortality Department, was called on November 14th by Golden Eagle Insurance owner John Maccabee. Maccabee had heard that Alydar had, quote, "kicked a cement block wall," end quote, and Brian needed to go get the facts and avoid rumors. Chambers did not know that Kathy Lundy Jones had called Terry McVeigh, Golden Eagle's adjuster, who hadn't answered the phone. Years earlier, McVeigh had taken over for Tom Dixon when he left Calumet. Unable to get McVeigh, Kathy Lundy had then called Tom Dixon. Playing phone tag, McVeigh finally spoke with Dr. Rhodes, who told him about Alydar's injury. As Golden Eagle's investigator, he went right over to Calumet and was denied entry. That's weird. Complaining to Brian Chambers, McVeigh was told to tell Calumet if he wasn't admitted, Golden Eagle was not going to pay the claim. And after some additional wrangling, McVeigh was brought to Alydar's stall by J.T. Lundy himself, approximately 2 p.m. McVeigh noted that Lundy didn't appear upset that his beloved horse had sustained a likely fatal injury. And McVeigh wondered, how on earth had this happened? Well, Lundy suggested that, quote, Alydar and a firm were bickering, with Alydar becoming frustrated and kicking the stall door, shearing off the guide, end quote. Well, this was the first time a reason why Alydar had kicked was floated, and unsuccessfully. McVeigh was not buying it. And subsequently, this version was never heard from again. Lundy then nonchalantly suggested that urine had soaked in over the years, eroding the metal brackets, so when kicked, boom. Well, when called in the early a.m., Calumet's chief of maintenance, Stanley Broughton, had repaired the door's roller bracket. He had seen that the bolts had been corroded to the size of pencil points, tossing the old nuts and bolts away. So wait a minute. McVeigh, Golden Eagle's insurance adjuster, hasn't even been to the scene, and this repair was made, and then Broughton threw away the evidence before the insurance guy could investigate it. Why would you do that? I mean, if you have a car accident, do you have it repaired before the insurance company sees it? That's just insane. I don't get it. Well, what is important is this corrosion story, because it made the amount of shearing force required far less significant in the analysis of this tragedy. For years going forward, the impossibility of a horse shearing off the bolts and roller bracket with a kick cycled around in the equine rumor mill, but none knew of the corrosion. Gray explains that this is misinformation, however. It is all about physics. The fact is, the actual shearing of the bolts itself plays almost no factor in the forces that would be involved in breaking Alydar's leg. What is significant is a 300-pound door secured on 3 sides and gravity, the combined force which would impact the type of injury itself. Another version of the accident was shared by Lundy with Terry McVeigh. After Alydar kicked the door in, his hoof went outside the stall wall, breaking when the door came down on top of it. Again, McVeigh was having none of this. The mechanics didn't work like that, nor were there any gouge or drag marks where the hoof would have made contact against the wall. McVeigh went about taking photographs. The stall walls were pristine, which indicated they had been sanitized, because Lundy had told him there was blood all over the place, which contradicts Dixon's eyewitness account and the photos. I opened this episode with McVeigh's statement of utter disbelief. Phoning Brian Chambers, he shared the latest version of Alydar's accident, leaving the man exasperated. Shifting stories, immediate unauthorized repairs, his adjuster not permitted access to the farm. Something was not right. Chambers and McVeigh would hold grave suspicions that something manufactured was set up that night in November. Now, a point of contention. Dixon and McVeigh disagreed on whether or not they shared information during this investigation, with Dixon saying he did fill in McVeigh and McVeigh lacking any such recollections. What is fact? Neither McVeigh nor Lundy ever told Dixon about the corroded brackets that had been quickly repaired. November 15th, 1990. Alydar, bright and alert, was still recovering from surgery in the sling. As time passed, Dr. Bramlage saw Alydar was getting annoyed with the sling. Now a difficult decision had to be made. Keep the horse sedated, which risked colic, a leading cause of premature death in horses, or remove him from the sling. Both were bad alternatives, but Dr. Bramlage opted to remove Alydar from the sling, with the chestnut horse standing wobbly on 4 legs. Alydar seemed to grow steadier, with Bramlage departing. Then Alydar made a step forward, couldn't balance on his rear leg, and fell, snapping his right femur of the same leg, as hearts plummeted through the floor. Calls went out as Dr. Bramlage raced back. Dr. Baker and Dr. Rhodes all arrived, as well as Dixon, all conferring. There was no choice. Alydar would be euthanized. In shock, Dixon was frozen in place. Lundy gave his consent. Michael Collier, Alydar's groom for the previous 2 years, was inconsolable. Quote, "It just broke my heart because he was just like, 'Don't leave me.' And the next thing you know, he's down on the ground and you're holding him and not letting him up, and they're sticking a needle in his neck." End quote. Ooh. Alydar was free from his pain. Dixon left the bar in tears. He'd never forget the terror in Alydar's eyes, and McVeigh arrived to take photos of the deceased Alydar. Bramlage's report blamed Alydar's temperament for his death, but Coulter knew that neither he nor Doc Baker were actually there when Alydar suffered the fatal second fall, and that would clash with what Coulter observed. That afternoon, Alydar was quietly buried in Calumet's graveyard with no ceremony. Before a small group, Lundy said, quote, "He fought and fought. He was really tough till the end." End quote. Well, I think that Alydar should have been shown some greater respect, given how beloved he was and what he had given to Calumet during his career. A statement was released, quote, "At 8:00 a.m. on Thursday morning, November 15th, 1990, Alydar fractured his right femur. He was humanely destroyed and buried on Calumet Farm." End quote. Feeling utter sadness, Dixon sent his first report to Lloyd's, containing Lundy's first version of the accident, a loud noise alerting them that Alydar had kicked the stall, fracturing the cannon bone. The farm office is in the same stallion barn, so they're close together. Photos of the x-rays and surgery were included, plus documentation from the euthanasia occurring 3 days after the initial injury. Alydar's value was also discussed, that he had sired many great stake winners, including Ali Sheba, Althea, and Criminal Type, who was contender for Horse of the Year. Alydar was the leading sire in the United States in 1990, and Dr. Bramlage, the premier orthopedic surgeon in the U.S., concurred that Alydar had broken his leg kicking the stall door. The physical evidence of the broken bracket confirmed this. And Lundy loved that horse, who was making Calumet millions in stud fees. Now Dixon knew Frall when he saw it, and this was not that. He'd finish his interviews and move on. The interview with Alton Stone, the watchman, was on November 19th. Susan McGee, Lundy's executive secretary, insisted on being present during the interview, with Dixon not objecting. And I'm paraphrasing their interview. "Dixon, you were filling in for the night man. Ordinarily, you're the day man." And Stone agreed. Dixon asked Stone to describe his routine from 9 or 9:30. Stone said, "I was patrolling the area, and I come up to the stallion bar like 9:30 and check the horse, did all the other routines I normally go through. I come back like 10:05 and double-check myself, and then I found Alydar standing there sweating." End quote. Dixon asked him to describe the door for him, and Stone said he didn't look at the door at all. Dixon asked if the door was closed, and Stone said yes, he was standing there facing me, wringing wet with sweat. So I immediately got on the radio and hollered for Sandy to come help me in the stallion bar. McGee interrupted, saying that Sandy Hatfield is Alton Stone's day supervisor. Dixon continued, "When you saw him standing there, did you try to open the door, or did you immediately just go call Sandy or Linda Rhodes, the vet?" Stone, "I immediately went to call." Quote, "When I first saw him, I didn't even notice the leg. I just seen the sweat, and I thought it was colic or something. That's when I discovered the leg like that." End quote. Dixon asked again, "Did you have any difficulty opening the door?" With him saying, "No, sir." Dixon asked, "When did you notice that he apparently kicked the door?" Quote, Stone said, "Well, I was coming out with the vet, and I kind of looked down, and I seen a piece of the roller lying on the floor, and I said, something's wrong." End quote. Dixon said, "So it would be guessing if he ever had his leg in between the stall door and wall. Did anybody actually ever see it in there? Stone said, no, sir. Dixon asked him, did he stay with the horse and wait on Linda and Sandy? And when did they arrive? Stone answered, yes, a couple minutes, with McGee saying seconds. Now, during his interview, Dixon wasn't being hard and grilling Stone. It was friendly and it was relaxed. Stone wasn't evasive, and they established the facts that he'd acted appropriately and was cooperative. McGee interrupting didn't throw him either, but Susan McGee insisted there were scrapes on the stall door and wall, and Dixon knew she was lying because he'd seen and taken the photos and there were no kicks or marks. Dixon faxed Stone's interview to Susan McGee the next day. He also followed up on Lundy's comment about hearing a noise at 10 p.m. from Alydar's stall. Someone heard it. Well, who was that? November 21st. Susan McGee called Dixon at 9:13 a.m. the next morning, and she retracted the original story Lundy had given. Dixon accepted this and updated his report. His handwritten notes read, quote, no one in the office that night. Had heard him kick stall in the office on other occasions, end quote. So no one had actually heard what happened. November 22nd, with 10 days past, Dixon had not formally interviewed Lundy, and he explained that he had been with the man during this whole saga, so it wasn't necessary. The insurance investigations, including Terry McVeigh's, were over. Dixon's second report included information from Dr. Rhodes and Dr. Bramlage's reports, plus the Lundy retraction. He wrote, quote, a review of our notes taken at the time, followed by other investigation, confirmed that no one was present in the stallion barn or office at the time the episode occurred. On previous occasions, workers in the barn had heard Alydar kicking his stall door. The enclosed photos show evidence of this long-term habit of the stallion, end quote. From Dr. Rhodes, Dixon included that when asked to, quote, state probable cause, Dr. Rhodes wrote trauma, kicked stall door / wall, end quote. Dr. Bramlage's report confirmed at Calumet he had observed Alydar's right hind limb bandaged, but uncontrolled by the horse. He never states how the injury occurred, which I did find a little bit odd, since he is the premier equine orthopedist in the country. Dixon also forwarded an article from Blood Horse magazine, which contained an interview with Dr. Bramlage and a diagram of the surgical repair. In this, Bramlage cited the method of injury as Alydar kicking through, quote, the door, bending the bone sideways enough to break, end quote. Now, Dixon himself relies on Alydar kicking the stall door. He rejects the hoof stuck in between the stall door and wall, which will be henceforth called the entanglement theory. In Anne Haggard-Dorn Auerbach's book, Wild Ride, published a year later, Dixon reaffirms his beliefs. On day 17, Dixon's third report was filed, this one including Dr. Baker's report, listing the cause as, quote, kicked stall door, end quote. Dixon had sent out 78 different claim forms for breeding rights and other policyholders, with all returned, and this closed the case and included a bill. Cray writes that this was an accident, uncontroversial, and Lloyd's paid the claim within 30 days, which I think is pretty fast, and in spite of the fact that Calumet Farm owed Lloyd's $1.2 million in premiums. Only later, the incongruity between Bramlage and Dixon's opinions on the cause would cause dissension. A hoof entangled in the stall door, bending and snapping the bone, is not the same as kicking a stall door. They are two different things. But on the other hand, Golden Eagle took their time paying the claim. McVeigh had initially been denied entry. Repairs had been made to the stall before he was able to see it and report on it. and neither McVeigh nor Chambers thought Alydar broke the strongest bone in a horse's leg by kicking a door, with Chambers voicing that this was, quote, a setup, end quote. Yet, no further investigation occurred, and in the end, Golden Eagle paid the $5 million. In 2002, John Maccabee, the owner of Golden Eagle, said he believed that Calumet had, quote, hoodwinked them. We should have never paid the claim because our policy said that if he was insured for more than $21 million by all companies, the policy was null and void. And they said the total was only $21 million, end quote. So clearly Calumet had lied about that. A shadow remained, however. Quote, few believed the official story. Not the Calumet grooms, not the farmhands, or those who worked with the horses, not the lawyers in the subsequent bankruptcy case, and the Lexington horse community likewise remained unconvinced, end quote. Now, before we get further into this story, we really need to understand more about Calumet and the horse that was Alydar, because it's critical in understanding the next sequence of events, causes, and consequences. Calumet Farm had stagnated since its heyday of champion horse after champion horse in the 1950s. Their last Kentucky Derby winner was Tim Tam in 1958. The owners of Calumet then, Lucille Wright Markey and her husband Gene. Social butterflies, they enjoyed their summer home in Saratoga Springs and then would snowbird to Miami Beach in the winters. Hobnobbing with Hollywood celebrities, they entertained the rich and famous. After genius trainer Ben Johnson left, Calumet declined. In 1976, Lucille Markey hired 30-year-old John Veach, whose talent for training thoroughbreds was in his DNA. Veach's job was simple: restore Calumet to their winning dominance, please. So the pressure was immense. John Veach had one shot at resurrecting Calumet, the mating of a mare named Sweet Tooth with the amazing stallion Raisin Native. This potential foal was salvation. The large chestnut colt was born March 23, 1975, with a white star on his forehead. It was a terrible year for Calumet, who won 4 races total. In the fall of 1976, yearlings are named, and this foal's name came from a playful greeting Lucille Markey used when meeting Prince Ali Khan. "Ali, darling," and Alydar was christened. Groomer Clyde Sparks loved and understood Alydar so much that he could calm him down before anyone recognized the horse was even upset. January 1st, 1977 is the official second birthday for all thoroughbreds born in 1975. Alydar was entered into the youthful stakes at Belmont Park in Elmont, New York on June 15, 1977, facing more experienced horses, including who would be his rival, Affirmed. Alydar took it all in, plodding along in 5th place, Affirmed beating him by a decisive 5 lengths. Next up was the Belmont Maiden Special Weight. Alydar broke well, took the lead on the turn, and won as confidence at Calumet skyrocketed. Charlie Rose became Alydar's exercise rider, who believed that racing was a partnership with the horse. Thus far, Alydar was nervous, would begin to lather and sweat up when coming onto the track or the race or during practice, wasting valuable energy, until Charlie and Alydar clicked. Quote, "He would do anything I wanted him to do. He was charismatic and intelligent. To me, he was a puppy dog. He knew when he was going to race. He liked the attention. He was all heart. He was a biter, though. If you weren't careful, he'd give you a good nip." End quote. Now, in racing, when galloping, each horse prefers to lead with their right or left legs, It's like we humans. When we stand up and walk, we usually lead with the same leg every time. You don't want to stop and think about it. You just do it. Well, in the United States, racetracks have left turns as horses run counterclockwise. During their training, horses learn to switch to lead left in left turns and right on the straight portions of the track. Switching leads helps to equalize the fatigue, and it often gives a burst of energy in the final stretch. Now, some horses just do this naturally, while others require jockey cues. Alydar failed to switch leads. He heavily favored his left, and he did not switch in the stretch run. His jockey, George Velasquez, teased that he was just the lefty. Quote, "He knew what you wanted, he just wouldn't do it." End quote. Once in a gallop, he didn't want to change, and he resented being made to switch. Well, if the horse wasn't going to do it, wasn't going to do it. What's it going to cost? Maybe a fifth of a second? July 6, 1977 was the Great American Stakes at Belmont, a handicap race where horses are assigned to carry different weights, making the race more competitive as more knowledge is needed in betting. Affirmed had to carry an extra 5 pounds, while Alydar was down 5 as they came to race each other for the third time. Affirmed was small, compact, balanced, and efficient, while Alydar was big, muscular, and charismatic. Affirmed led, but Alydar closed the stretch, winning by 3.5 lengths. At the Tremont Stakes at Belmont Park, Alydar hung back, and in the final furlong, he exploded, thundering past his competitors, winning by a length and a quarter. In April 77, the Sapling Stakes were held at Monmouth Park, New Jersey, and I was there for this. I saw Alydar race that day. Wearing blinkers, the track was muddy, and Alydar crushed the competition by 2.5 lengths. Personable, social, Alydar now recognized his trainers, his grooms, and he'd nicker happily on seeing Clyde Sparks, Charlie Rose, John Veach, George Velasquez. At Saratoga, the Hopeful Stakes was an Alydar affirmed rematch. The Sportsman of the Year was a 17-year-old jockey, Stephen Cawthon, who beat out Muhammad Ali and Reggie Jackson, 17 years old. Cawthon rode affirmed, and I can affirm, see what I did, Cawthon was one hell of a jockey. I saw him win more times than I can count, and he won now. Alydar and affirmed pulled away from the pack, affirmed pressed slightly ahead, winning by a length. And once again, Alydar had refused to switch leads. Had this made the half-length difference? Well, it could. And the longer the race, the more this would be an issue. Next up was the Futurity Stakes at Belmont, the fourth meeting of Alydar and affirmed. Both magnificent stallions roared down the track, and in the far turn, Alydar was literally ahead, but affirmed took it by a nose. Frustrated, Veach switched Alydar's jockey from Eddie Maples, who was a very good rider, to George Velasquez, who I've mentioned. Meeting Velasquez, he and Alydar bonded, becoming very close, with Velasquez being able to influence Alydar's behavior and coax greater cooperation from the horse. Back at Belmont for the Champagne Stakes, affirmed and Alydar met for the 5th time. Muddy from an earlier rain, the horses shot out of the gate. Affirmed paused in 3rd place, Alydar in 5th. Affirmed began to push to the lead with Darby Creek Road vying at his hip. Alydar began to move to the outside, charging ahead, and taking the wire, winning by a length and a quarter. It's Alydar! Now, the Alydar affirmed rivalry continued. Late October 1977 at Laurel Park, Maryland. This would be the longest race yet for affirmed and Alydar. Affirmed's camp was now paranoid about Alydar's chances, strategizing to hold affirmed back early and wait for Alydar to surge and then outrun the challenger. In the final turn, Alydar surged, with affirmed fighting back, winning by a neck. And Veach was crushed and made an impulsive decision to race Alydar at Aqueduct without affirmed. And this proved to be a huge mistake. Believe It, ridden by Eddie Maple, Alydar's former jockey, beat Alydar by 2 lengths. And Veach admitted, quote, "I was a moron. I was just trying to recoup the Laurel futurity loss," end quote. Well, horses do need to rest in between races, and Aqueduct was just too soon. Looming before Veach was the run up to the Triple Crown. All were longer races, where Alydar's failure to switch leads might become a greater issue. After wintering in Florida's Hialeah Park, training kicked into high gear, and Alydar became so proficient, Veach bragged to the press about it. But Charlie Rose was not optimistic, knowing Alydar's preferences. In February 1978, now a 3-year-old, at Hialeah, Alydar easily outran the pack by 2 lengths. After working hard, Alydar won, but didn't switch leads, with Veach tearing his hair out. Slightly less than a month later, Alydar would win the Flamingo Stakes by 4.5 lengths. And no, he didn't switch leads then either. April 1978 brought the rematch with Believe It, with both groom Charlie Sparks and jockey George Velasquez injured in horse racing mishaps. With Alydar feeling his oats, he was pulling a hurt Sparks all over the barn. Speaking softly, patting Alydar, George was the horse whisperer, quote, "Come on, champ. He's an old man. You don't want to do that to him," end quote, with Alydar settling down, surprising Sparks. When Alydar grew stubborn and was resisting getting into the starting gate, George spoke over Alydar's shoulder, quote, "Champ, you see all these people here? They're here to see you perform. Don't be doing this in front of everyone. You gotta get in the gate," end quote. And Alydar walked right in. And they were off. Alydar was in 4th place, Believe It right behind him, and on the far turn, Alydar took a brief lead, with Believe It pulling ahead. Velasquez wrapped Alydar twice, and he went off, pulling ahead by 2 lengths, the winner. Now, normally, Alydar's next race should have been Wood Memorial, the last race before the Kentucky Derby. Instead, Alydar would race in the Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland, giving Alydar only 9 days to recover before Churchill Downs. See, Keeneland was very close by Calumet, which meant the now wheelchair-bound, elderly and frail, Lucille Markey and husband Gene would be able to see her Alydar race in person. This was pure sentimentality, and Veach wanted it to happen. It would be the only time the Markeys would see Alydar run. At Keeneland, George rode Alydar over to the Markeys. Lucille was standing out of her chair, Mrs. Markey's face alight seeing her beautiful, powerful chestnut stallion, who bowed his head to them. Full of himself, Alydar pranced towards the gate, bobbing and showing off. When the bell rang, Alydar came out flat-footed and slowed, bumping Sunny Songster. With Alydar way in the back, Raymond Earl pulled away, his jockey, Bobby Bard, trying to gain an insurmountable early lead. Realizing this, Velasquez pushed Alydar for more speed, with him surging, and the crowd went wild as Alydar passed Raymond Earl and opened a 13-length lead. The Markeys were helped to the rail for the stretch, with Lucille bellowing, "Come on, Alydar!" radiating unbridled joy at seeing her beauty win. Veach would say, quote, "She talked about it until the day she died," end quote. And the Triple Crown awaited. The Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs is the formal beginning of the Triple Crown season. With a huge field, this race favors maneuverability. Known for big hats and mint juleps, the pageantry is over the top. The next is the Preakness in Maryland, shortest of the three. It favors speed. The final race is the Belmont in New York, the longest at 1.5 miles, favoring endurance. Only 13 horses since 1875 have won the Triple Crown, the pinnacle of achievement in horse racing. In 1978, this was one of the strongest years for Derby challengers. These included Sensitive Prince, undefeated in 6 starts, whose trainer had produced Triple Crown winner Secretariat, who is a horse I could talk to you about forever. What a special horse, what an amazing athlete. Paraphrasing now, Alydar was the sentimental favorite, the Marquis's last chance at the Derby. In position 10, Velasquez was told to stay out of trouble. And Cawthon, unaffirmed at position 2, Cawthon would break fast, following the speed horses and watching out for Alydar. The call to post trumpeted, ratcheting up the anticipation. As Velasquez rode past the stands, the crowds roared for Alydar. The sky was crystal clear, conditions perfect. Alydar balked going into the gate at first, with Velasquez, hand bound in his mane, crouched down, weight balanced on those tiny stirrups. They were ready. And the bell rang, and they're off. Raymond Earl went for the lead, Affirmed trailing closely, and Sensitive Prince in third. Immediately, Velasquez knew Alydar was having trouble. Working hard to get Alydar going, tapping his shoulder, there was no response, and they fell 17 lengths off to 9th place. Charlie Rose about died, thinking that Alydar was injured. Affirmed sprang to the lead, and Believe It came up fast, pressing. And Alydar surged with 3/16 of a mile to go. Velasquez thought they might make it to the third, but Alydar was still on the left lead. In fourth and on the outside, Alydar took off like he had just broken from the starting gate. Passing Believe It, the crowd roared. Cawthon unaffirmed heard and saw Alydar driving, but there wasn't enough track to catch Affirmed, who won by a length and a half. Veach was beside himself and blamed the hard-packed track. Many were confused by Alydar's dawdling pace the first 3/4 of the race. Well, 10 years later, an explanation surfaced. Alydar was in the detention barn for a drug test, and Charlie Rose saw Alydar's eye was completely swollen. Quote, "The track was packed so hard, the clods, it was not flying back as sand, it was flying back as chunks. By the time the doctor came to treat him, bandaged it, nobody was around, so nobody noticed anything." End quote. Reviewing the tape, it looked like it happened as the horses passed the grandstand for the first time. Alydar jerked his head back and then fell back the 17 lengths. At the time, they opted to keep quiet, not stealing Affirmed's thunder, and later Cawthon confirmed he had been hit by a clod and it felt like being hit with a baseball bat. Real fact. Alydar failed to switch leads again. May 20th, 1978, Pimlico Race Course in Baltimore, Maryland. 2 issues emerged. Would Alydar's eye heal enough for him to race? And that they would find out the day of the race. The second, would Alydar be able to catch Affirmed? He almost had, giving over a 17-length lead. They were confident. And the Preakness was a 16th of a mile shorter, favoring early speed, which was not Alydar's strength. Veach adjusted. Keep Alydar closer to Affirmed in the stretch. Maryland, My Maryland was playing, the blanket of black-eyed Susans awaiting the winner. Believe It was back with 4 other horses. And then the bell, the gates flying open, and Affirmed in the lead. Believe It was in third, Alydar 6th. Velasquez asked Alydar for speed. Pouring it on, Alydar swung wide on the outside, Believe challenging on the rail. Alydar then drew closer to Affirmed, with Velasquez hitting Alydar on the hip, the signal to switch to his right lead, which did not happen. Alydar drew up even with Affirmed's neck as Cawthon hit Affirmed on his right, with Affirmed leading in hard. Alydar made a final push, but came in second. Veach had no excuses. His horse had run well. Some wondered if Alydar's heart had been broken. But no, he was just too good for that. And 7 of 9 horses who won the Derby and the Preakness failed to win the Belmont. The 110th Belmont Stakes, Elmont, New York. Jockeys have named the track the Big Sandy due to both its length and the deep sandy surface. Cray explains, quote, "For Affirmed, the Triple Crown was at stake. For Alydar, the race was about redemption," end quote. Veach changed it up. He had Velasquez run Alydar 1.5 miles and removed Alydar's blinkers, providing a new, fresh, inspiring view. They'd go after Affirmed earlier. And yeah, the lead change wasn't happening, not on even the longest races. Now, twice before, Alydar had beat Affirmed. Only 5 horses were running in 1978, with the sidewalks of New York playing. Fans cheered for Alydar, jockeys mounted, and Veach again told Velasquez to stay closer to Affirmed. And bell. Judge Advocate broke early, causing a false start. Reloaded, a hush came over the crowd in anticipation, and tension grew. And bell. Affirmed broke with Alydar surprisingly right there on his left shoulder. At the first turn, it was Affirmed, Judge Advocate, and Alydar. As Cawthon tried to bait Alydar to the rail, Velasquez went to the outside. The pace was not fast, with Cawthon saving Affirmed for the stretch. Moving past Judge Advocate, Velasquez put pressure on Affirmed, with the crowd roaring as the horses came to be side by side, a mile from the finish. The duel had begun, with the other horses 6 lengths behind. Alydar challenged, with Affirmed digging in. As they began the stretch, Cawthon felt Affirmed begin to fatigue as uncertainty sunk in. Velasquez asked Alydar for speed. Charlie Rose and Veach were losing their minds as Alydar took the lead, and then Affirmed's head jutted forth, with Alydar running on the wrong lead. Oh my God, they were close together, and there was no room to the right, as Cawthon hit Affirmed for the first time ever with his left hand, surprising Affirmed, who edged past Alydar, even as Alydar responded, and wire. One of the most famous photos in horse racing history shows Alydar and Affirmed, Velasquez with his right hand crop, Cawthon with his left. Affirmed had won the Belmont. Velasquez yelled over to Steve, quote, "Stevie, congratulations," with Cawthon shouting back, "It ain't been easy," end quote. Velasquez was proud of Alydar, the effort, his heart. Third place was Darby Creek, 13 lengths behind. That's how good these 2 horses were, and now they were exhausted, heads hanging with fatigue. What ifs are painful. What if Alydar had switched leads? Would he have won? If Vasquez hadn't crowded Affirmed and forced Cawthon to the left-hand whip, would Alydar have won? There is a reason they call this the greatest rivalry in horse racing history. And it wasn't over. The Travers Stakes is the 4th leg of the Triple Crown, and that was coming up on August 19th. Energizer Bunny Alydar bounced back quickly, and with all his energy, he needed a race. As George Velasquez had a prior commitment, Jeffrey Fell would ride Alydar, winning by 13 lengths. Next was the Whiskey Stakes at Saratoga, and the horse to beat was Joe Tobin, who shared a trainer with Affirmed. At the start, Alydar was behind by 13, but hit the stretch, he took off, and he switched leads, winning by 10 lengths. He did it. He finally did it. Then came the Saratoga Travers, the final showdown between Alydar and Affirmed. Cawthon had been injured, so Lafitte Pincay would be riding affirmed. And Alydar flat out refused to cooperate with any of the substitute riders, and Charlie Rose was called up from Monmouth Park to placate Alydar, who wanted his beloved Charlie. Seeing Charlie, Alydar got back on track immediately. Velasquez was totally pumped up for the Travers. With Alydar switching leads, victory felt assured. Affirmed entered the track to cheers, then came Shake, 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 Nasty and Bold, and lastly Alydar to heavy applause. And they were off. With a clean start, both Affirmed and Alydar broke quickly. Around the turn, Alydar was last on the outside. Down the backstretch, began accelerating, taking third. Shake, Shake, Shake drifted towards the center, shifting Affirmed out to the middle with the rail open, and Velasquez went for it, challenging Affirmed for the lead. Surprised, Pincay saw Alydar gaining on the inside and closed to the left, but Alydar was already there. Quote, Velasquez felt himself and the horse hitting the rail and thought he was going to go down. He grabbed the reins and violently twisted Alydar's head in a valiant effort to stay up. It was a miracle Velasquez wasn't thrown, and Alydar's head grazed Affirmed's rump as he jumped over Affirmed's hind legs to avoid catastrophe. End quote. Alydar lost stride and dropped back 6 lengths, appearing to be out of contention. Regaining his poise, Alydar's great athleticism kicked in, trying to catch Affirmed in the final turn, as Alydar switched to the right lead again. But making up the distance was not enough. Velasquez was certain Affirmed would be disqualified, so he eased up on Alydar after he passed Nasty and Bold. Affirmed hit the wire 1 3/4 lengths before Alydar, and the inquiry light went up immediately. After reviewing the tapes, there was no question or disagreement. Pincay Jr. had fouled, and he was banned from riding for 7 days. Affirmed was disqualified. Alydar placed first. Alydar had suffered an injury, a cut across the tendon on his right foreleg, just missing severing it. Veach was livid, hosing the horse's leg down to prevent swelling for hours. Both horses could have been killed, and it was a terrible way to end the rivalry. Disappointed at the shoddy ride Pincay had given Affirmed. And this happened when Alydar finally began switching leads. Oh my God, the frustration. 3 weeks later, Alydar fractured his collarbone in a workout, ending his 3-year-old season. As a 4-year-old, Alydar won the Whirlaway Purse by 7 lengths, then lost 3 in a row. June 17, 1979, on a rainy, cast-over day, Alydar ran in the Nassau County Handicap at Belmont. During his race, a rainbow appeared at the starting gate just as Alydar approached. Believe it, and Alydar raced, with Alydar crossing the finish line where the rainbow ended in a magical moment. Not long afterward, Alydar suffered another hairline fracture, and retirement time had come. Alydar had earned a little bit less than $1 million, one of the best horses to never win a divisional title. He was inducted into the Horses Hall of Fame in 1989. In 2013, there I go again, I might have some affection for this horse. Since 2013, the Alydar Stakes have been held at Saratoga Park in his honor. The first winner was Victoria Olympia, ridden by John Velasquez. Emotionally parting from Charlie Rose, Veach, Velasquez, Alydar arrived at Calumet Farm. Lucille Markey was in her 80s, and the farm was being run by the old guard. Margaret Glass booking stallions, Veach training the horses, and Alydar's $40,000 stud fee kept Calumet running in the black. With Lucille's death, Calumet would pass to her children, Warren Wright Jr., who had sadly predeceased his parents, leaving it to his widow Bertha and their children. Lucille's granddaughter, Lucille Cindy Wright, who was a 16-year-old high school student when she married 21-year-old J.T. Lundy, Lundy had had his eye on Calumet since he was in high school. To prove himself to Lucille Markey, he bought a small farm in Midway, Kentucky, running it. Well, this failed as Lucille found Lundy, quote, an uneducated son of a tenement farmer, coarse, crude, loud, and profane, end quote. She would die at age 85 on July 24th, 1982. Calumet office manager Margaret Glass organized the funeral. John Veach was a pallbearer, and Lundy was not. The bulk of her estate, $460 million, went to medical research. The farm went to the right heirs, with Lucille likely rolling over in her grave, as none had any horse sense. By this time, Cindy and JT were already estranged, and eventually they'd divorce. But Cindy continued to provide support for her ex. Bertha Wright moved into the mansion, appointing Lundy, the only one who knew anything about horses, to run the farm. If Lundy kept the checks coming in, Bertha would be pleased. The day after the funeral, Lundy was the new president of Calumet. With total authority, he cleaned house. Office manager of 35 years, Margaret Glass, was replaced with Janice Hines. Veach was out, with Lundy hiring Frank Whitley as top trainer. Veach would later say, quote, I had known JT and Frank Whitley for years. I didn't find them honorable people, and I really didn't think they were capable of ever carrying on the tradition of something that I was proud to be associated with, end quote. Veach was banned from Calumet and would never see Alydar alive again. The vast opinion of the Lexington equine community was that Lundy was in over his head. There was no way he was going to be able to handle a complicated, prestigious operation like Calumet, and this assessment proved all too accurate. Lyle Roby, a childhood friend of Lundy's, would serve as the Wrights' financial, business, and legal advisor, also representing the farm, which caused conflicts of interest when the heirs gave personal guarantees to Calumet loans. JT was also the managing general partner in Wright Enterprises, so although Roby and Lundy had to answer to the Calumet's executive committee, Lundy was managing Wright Enterprises as well, having access to all these accounts. Sadly, the Wright heirs didn't care enough about the horses and Calumet to pay attention, to their serious detriment. Lundy's sister handled Calumet's insurance. His son Frank was the farm's bloodstock agent, buying and selling horses for breeding and racing. Truth was, Frank Lundy did little more than collect hefty paychecks. And I bet you'll be shocked that 27-year-old Janice Hines would become JT's girlfriend and Calumet's pedigree consultant, so she would choose which pair of horses would breed. Susan McGee was 25 when she was hired as Lundy's executive secretary, after working at an animal diagnostic lab for a few years, and was Janice's roomie. Both women traveled in Calumet jets, which were leased and purchased all over the world with JT. Lundy's MO: hire people loyal to him, not people with the actual qualifications to do the job. He couldn't plunder the farm or the Wright accounts without them. JT Lundy embarked on an extensive remodeling plan for Calumet, updating the huge front gates, restricting access. The house was also redone, and he resurfaced the racetrack 3 times. A pool was installed, the barns refurbished, and he added a veterinarian clinic. He made some horrifically bad deals on horses, buying a half share in horses Secreto and Mongambo at a cost of $30 to $55 million. Neither horse generated significant income when they went to stud. Secreto's 30,000 stud fee didn't even cover his maintenance costs. Lundy hired super trainer D. Wayne Lucas, who was ostentatious and in the public eye, which is what Lundy wanted. They'd fly from Kentucky to New York and all over the country, throwing money around, living big, living lavishly. Very lucrative, Lundy ultimately controlled who would breed with Alydar, which pressured the community to maintain a friendly face if they wished access to this magnificent stallion's DNA. He raised Alydar's stud fee to $250,000 and also sold lifetime breeding rights to Alydar for $2.5 million. By 1990, 19 lifetime breeding rights had been sold. Alydar's foals were selling for over $2 million, with Alydar the top sire in the United States. Lundy paid himself commissions for the horses sold by Calumet, and he was breeding Alydar close to 100 times per season, far more than the 70 or 75 times that was normal. He ignored concerns by Alydar's veterinarians and groom. When the Lexington horse community learned that Lundy was breeding Alydar to quarter horses, not thoroughbreds, they were aghast. Rumor ran amok that Lundy would breed Alydar behind the scenes at night for cash. So this guy is pimping out Alydar. It is unbelievably distasteful. Oh my God. What truly astonished me reading was that Lundy gave out these breeding rights like candy to his friends, employees, and associates, which is insane. Lundy had his personal breeding rights and used them to sweeten deals, which sucked Calumet's income away while it carried the cost of maintaining the horses. Lundy was hell-bent on showing the bluegrass establishment that J.T. Lundy was someone, that he could do it bigger and better, feeding his delusions of grandeur, sucking the viability out of Calumet in the process. Reckless, irrational decision-making, delusions of grandeur, no conscience, not understanding the consequences, blaming others for his failures. These are symptoms of what? Narcissism. When Alydar died, Calumet appeared to be on the top of the world. Alydar's son, criminal type, won Horse of the Year, and other honors, even as large loans from various banks loomed. None suspected that Calumet was in serious financial trouble. When Lucille Markey died in 1982, the farm was fully paid for, in good condition, and operating in the black. Certainly the farm would take a financial hit when Alydar died, but the $41.5 million of insurance would certainly cushion that grazing blow, right? The idea of Alydar being killed for the insurance money was absurd, fantastical. The frequent argument made by Dr. Bramblage, Dr. Baker, Tom Dixon, and others was that killing Alydar made no sense. He was worth more alive than dead. But was he? Now, talk about leaving matters up in the air. This is where episode 92, Salvation, concludes. Until my next episode, 93, Entanglements, Unbroken. I cannot wait for part 2, where we get into the investigation and the right family meets their fate. Now, our next book. So at CrimeCon 2024, I met Lindsay Wade, who is warm and friendly and upbeat, and my respect and admiration for her knows no bounds. We are delving into her book, In My DNA, published in 2022. Lindsay's 21-year law enforcement career was motivated by horrifying crimes against young women and girls that impacted her as a child and ignited her relentless pursuit of justice for victims. Her book isn't about a single case, but instead her career, delving into shocking sex crimes and homicides in the Tacoma region of Washington state. Plus, we gained her unique perspective as a biracial female detective in a male-dominated profession, and I found this story compelling. Thank you for listening, Murder Bookies. I see you as you hear me. Please take a few minutes to leave an awesome review that will help me make new Murder Bookies. Share your thoughts with me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com, on X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube, or join Patreon for $4 a month. Enjoy your summer. Wear sunscreen. Lots and lots and lots of sunscreen. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.